Pula Vinaka, and welcome to another edition of Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. I'm your host, Dion Davu, and joining us today in studio, the FRA Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Now, having a well-maintained road network that enables people to travel to their destinations safely, efficiently, and comfortably is fundamental to any growing economy. And for us here in Fiji, the Fiji Roads Authority is the organization responsible for facilitating the roading needs of our nation. Mr. Moore, we welcome you today to the show, and of course, thank you for taking the time out to be with us.
Thank you, Dion.
And yes, getting things started, please tell us a little bit about yourself, and if it's not too much to ask, can you give us a little insight into your career to date?
Yeah, I was born in England, far many more years than I'd like to remember ago. In the middle of England, near Birmingham, and I was never an academic when I was at school, so I dropped out of school fairly early, and I went into working as a labourer in construction sites and infrastructure projects from around about the age of 16, 17, then went back to academic life to get qualified properly. But my career to date has mostly been outside of England. I've spent a long time working in the Middle East, in the desert, and in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Qatar, and India as well. And the 4 years before I came to Fiji, I was in Southeast Asia working there as well on major infrastructure projects.
So safe to say that you have been around. And of course, for our listeners joining us this afternoon, yes, you did make mention that you started as a laborer at only 16 years old. So literally, you started from the bottom, and you could say you've reached the top now.
Actually, I'd say I started from lower than the bottom, because when you're a labourer in England, you're treated quite badly. You do the fetching and carrying for all the seasoned workers. You do all the messy jobs. But yeah, you start from the bottom and you work your way up. And I've always seen that as a positive. I understand not only the theory behind construction and building roads, I also know how to do it as well. So I've done it myself. So that's always been useful in my career.
Very interesting. And getting into it, what exactly are the responsibilities of the Fiji Roads Authority?
We look after approximately 1,800 kilometres of sealed roads, another almost 6,000 kilometres of unsealed roads. We also look after 608 bridges, 569 crossings, and 36 jetties, plus street lighting, traffic signals, and footpaths as well. Interesting point, though, is that we're not the only owner of roads in Fiji. We're one of many. So we get many requests for upgrading roads that aren't actually ours. There are many FSC roads, there are logging roads, farm roads, and many private roads as well that we don't get involved with.
Now, you say there are many roads apart from just the Fiji Roads Authority, what the Fiji Roads Authority maintains. Now, you also mentioned the FSC and logging roads. Those actually are under the care of those specific companies, am I correct?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, there are some sugarcane roads that we actually do upgrade if there's a bus service to a village along it. But that's a very, very small percentage of the total of the cane roads.
So it's cane roads, of course, this is the EFL, and yes, the logging roads. Those specific companies look after those areas, and the Fiji Roads Authority takes care of the rest. Now, you also mentioned that the Fiji Roads Authority looks after jetties. That's something new. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you've got 36 around the country. The most notable ones I think most people would be aware of would be Nambualu and Natovi and Savasavu, but out in the outer islands, we've got many jetties that we look after as well.
Very interesting. Of course, the Fiji Roads Authority maintains and ensures that those jetties are open to members of the public.
Yeah, we do. It's a massive challenge, actually. We're trying to fight a battle with underinvestment in the past, and one of the most obvious and clear indicators of the underinvestment is the state of the jetties right now. So in the next few years, we're undertaking quite a significant upgrade of jetties throughout the country. Includes 6 new jetties in the next 2 or 3 years, followed by major refurbishments or upgrades to Nambualu, Natovi and Savasavu. They carry the bulk of the travel around the country.
I see. And at this moment in time, apart from the jetty upgrades, what are a few of the major issues that the FRA faces that you would like members of the public to be aware of?
I think the biggest one for us right now is recovering from I keep talking about it every time I speak to anybody in the press about the accelerated deterioration through underinvestment in the past. It's phenomenal. When we build a bridge, we expect to have a bridge that lasts 80 years at least. You go for 100 years. I mean, there are bridges throughout the world that have been there for 500-600 years. So we've recently carried out a study on the bridges in Fiji, and a cross-section of 46 of the bridges we checked, we found that the average life across 46 of the bridges was 43 years. So we're getting half the life of bridges that we should be getting in Fiji, and that's down to several things. One is poor design and installation in the first place, poor maintenance for the last few decades. Since they were constructed, when you build a bridge, you maintain from day one. You can't leave it for 5 or 10 years thinking it's okay because it's new. It'll still deteriorate. So this problem goes back to the 70s with underinvestment in the first place, and pretty much no maintenance on things like bridges and jetties and crossings. So they lose their life, and now we're faced with huge replacement costs because they weren't maintained in the first place.
Very interesting. I mean, this is something that many members of the public, myself included, were not aware of. So in the first place, the bridges, the infrastructure was not properly built.
May not have been, and it could have been, but we can't really tell now because it's been so badly maintained. But the suspicion in some cases it was maybe built to an inferior standard, or materials may not have been appropriate. Material issues in Fiji are big because we don't get good materials all over the country. So in many locations, people use what's available, and that's standard throughout the world. You use what you can. So this is why sometimes, particularly on the outer islands, you might expect to get a shorter life of an asset like a bridge, because the materials that you'd want to use aren't necessarily there. But there's no excuse at all in Viti Levu or Vanuatu Levu. There are plenty of materials here that can be used, so they should have been built right in the first place. But the key thing is the lack of maintenance.
Lack of maintenance.
And the second thing to compound that is the extent of overloading that's going on right now.
Yes, I mean, I've noticed over the years that the Fiji Roads Authority, along with the Land Transport Authority, has put out a number of, I would say, warnings or notices to business owners in regards to overloading of their vehicles, especially the large cargo trucks and lorries moving through in and out of the various urban centers. Now, you do say maintenance. Now, this happened in the past, and obviously, since you've come in, you've tried to make amends and see how we can move forward with a better plan for the future?
Yeah, what we're doing now is the first thing I did was I went into bridges and crossings, mainly bridges because they're the most vulnerable right now. I went into bridges in some detail with one of my teams in the office, and we did a survey of the worst damaged and maintained bridges to see how long they would last. So we created the critical bridges packages, which have now been awarded throughout the country. That's 17 bridges to be replaced in the next 15 to 20 months. There's another tranche of bridges after that, which will be designed next year to be done in the following year, and there's another 20 there. But it's all very well building new bridges, but we have to maintain what's built. So
certainly is.
We're trying to prolong the life of the bridges that are here already by doing smaller repairs and proper maintenance. So I've got a team of guys now that are actually out there doing maintenance checks on all the bridges.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moore. Stay with us. We'll have more after the break. Welcome back to our second segment of Speak Your Mind. With us in studio right now, we've got our guest today, the Chief Executive Officer of the Fiji Roads Authority. A very interesting first segment there, Mr. Moore. And yes, moving on, what would you like members of the public to understand about our current road infrastructure and the FRA's future plans?
I think the thing about the infrastructure now is that it is so degraded, and we're trying our best to actually put it into a condition that's serviceable. We could go ahead and do lots and lots of repairs like potholes and carriageway repairs, but they don't work in the long term. So we're changing the focus now, away from being reactive and more to be proactive. So we're looking at doing full rehabilitation projects on the roads. So when you do a pothole repair, that may last for a few weeks. And in Fiji, it is a few weeks because the rain is so intense, particularly in the Suva area. Potholes cannot stand up to the rain. That's a fact. So they're a temporary measure. You get the patch repairs on carriageways, which are probably a bit more longevity in them, maybe a year or two. And then you can do the reseal jobs, which maybe give you 5 to 8 years, which is great. It gives you a decent surface for 5 to 8 years. But what we're looking to do in the future as we go ahead is to actually do full rehabilitation to give you 25 years. And again, you don't do 25 years and ignore it for the first 5. you have to maintain it from day one again on your roads. It's keeping them clean, keeping them free of dirt in the drains so the water doesn't accumulate, and managing the maintenance in a consistent way. So going forward, the emphasis is on being proactive to do more durable
rather
solutions.
than reactive.
Yeah, reactive doesn't work. Proactive is what we need to be. And we do more durable solutions, and at the same time run a proper maintenance project on the roads.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moore. And moving on, how does the Fiji Roads Authority identify which areas need upgrading? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, how does the FRA look and see, like, we need to take care of this place first? Are there certain standards that have to be met, or is there certain a criteria, rather, that needs to be met in order for the FRA to carry out specific upgrading?
Yeah, there's no substitute for looking. So I have a team of guys out there. I'm very fortunate that the team in the FRA I've inherited is a very competent team, and they're learning all the time, and they're gaining experience all the time, and they go out there and they can tell pretty well if a road's damaged or not. They know when it's in a poor condition, and they can pretty much look at it and say what it needs to have done to it. But there are actually more empirical ways to do it. You can do tests, and you can think of an IRI test, which tells you how rough the road is, and you can do all manner of deformation tests on the road, and that will tell you the condition of the structure. So first of all, we look at the road, see what condition it's in, and then you do the test to see the extent of the repair that's required. Every road's different.
And it would be safe to say that you have teams of FRA workers out probably each and every day around the country, just examining the road, various infrastructure that we have and trying to identify which areas need upgrading first?
Yeah, we do. I mean, that's one of the things that I first spotted when I came out here, was that there was not enough people. When I first joined the FRA about 18 months ago, there was about 130 people, and no way can you manage a highway network like this with 130 people. So we set off on a recruitment plan, a recruitment drive, and we're now at 240. And most of those guys are out in the field. And by the end of the year, we're looking at getting to 300, because I want specific condition inspectors on the road. And their job is to go out there and do exactly what you say. They go and look and they check. And every month they do a circuit of roads. So they know exactly what's happening on those roads. And every road in Fiji will be covered every month. And that gives us a better proactive approach to how we maintain them.
Now, just in regards to the manpower issue, you made mention that you'd like to increase the number of personnel. If there are any members of the public interested in joining the FRA, do they require a formal education, a certificate of qualifications, or is it something that they can learn on the job?
They do require a basic standard of education. And in some roles, you actually have to have a proper qualification, a master's degree or a degree if you're in a specialist area. But we're running a very intense training scheme as well. So I've always said to the team in the office, never rule anybody out. You may not, you don't know what you got until you speak to them. So I'd like to, anybody who wants to join the FRA is welcome to submit an application, no problem at all, and we'll take everyone on their merit.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Moore. And generally speaking, can you take us through the process involved when laying a stretch of road or developing a new stretch of road?
Wow.
Just very generally,
Okay,
sir.
it depends what you're doing. I mean, if you're doing a new road where there's never been one before, the first thing to sort out is the appropriate route. You have to make sure the route's correct. And then you have to acquire the land. Land acquisition in Fiji is a massive issue for us. Time, cost, and just the uncertainty of who owns what. That's one of the problems. But once you've found the route for the road, you basically have to get down to stable ground. And sometimes that will mean overloading the ground for maybe 2 years to consolidate it, to make sure it's solid beneath you. And then you start off with the layers of gravel and stone to give you a good working base and a good structure to the road. And then you finish off gradually as you go through, you end up with a wearing course on the top, and that's the sealing coat. And that's what maintains the structure of the road. But within all that, you have to put your drainage, your utilities, the curb and channel and footpaths. So it's basically a layering operation.
Layers upon layers.
Yeah, and the layers have to be treated properly as well. If you miss the compaction on one layer, it affects the entire road. So quality control is pretty important. And another thing that's been lacking in the past is proper quality control. So we're bringing a bit more intense focus on quality with everything we do now.
So in our prior segment, you made mention that in certain instances, the infrastructure was not constructed correctly and also another thing is maintenance, and yet another issue is the quality control, because of course for the road system itself, every layer has to be perfect, so to speak.
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you think about quality of the roads, you have to think about the basics right from the start, the materials that you use. And I say there's a shortage of good materials in certain parts of the country, so you use what you have. Therefore, the quality of the road isn't as good, and you end up having to repair it more often. But if we can focus on getting the quality right in the first place with the materials that we use, and then focus on getting the installation correct, then the road should hold together pretty well. This isn't rocket science. This is very simple.
Yes, certainly is. And now moving on, now many roads in and around Fiji that are a major access route for a lot of communities, they have yet to be sealed or upgraded, or in certain cases, there's never been a properly constructed road. What would you advise the communities in these areas?
Yeah, we have a quite an extensive rural roads project coming up now. Currently, we have 160 kilometres of roads in construction or upgrade throughout the country. And we're also looking at another 77 kilometres actually in the tender review right now. We've tendered them out to contractors and we're going through the award process. And at the same time as with the delivery and the tendering, we're also looking at another 170 kilometres of scoping works right now throughout the country. So in total, over 300 kilometres are in one form or another in the process right now. And going forward, that will be repeated. It'll be like a roll-on programme. Our mission is to get access to every village in Fiji. And I know there are some that are not accessible right now. So we're working through with pilot cuts where you cut through the actual vegetation to form a flat space. And then when you've done the pilot cut, you come in and put an unsealed road in there.
Very interesting, of course. And for you joining us from those certain areas, yes, patience is needed. The Fiji Roads Authority, no doubt, will be getting to you as soon as they can. And stay with us. We'll have more in our next segment. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. Joining us today in studio, the Chief Executive Officer of the Fiji Roads Authority, Mr. Jonathan Moore, who's so kindly given his time to be with us and explain to us what the Fiji Roads Authority does, what they are currently doing, and of course what plans they have for the future. Now, Mr. Moore, during the break, we touched a little bit on the land ownership issue. Would you mind delving into that? You say you have problems in that certain areas people want the road to be built in their area, but yet they don't want to give up the land. How is this? How does the FRA deal with this?
Well, we have to, if we're going to build and maintain a road, we have to have the land that the road sits on vested to the FRA, and that gives us the right to do what we need to do on that road. So if we're putting a road out into a new area where there's never been a road before, there's no road right of way there. We have to acquire land, and you need the consent of everybody to get the road through. So there's compensation that needs to be paid, there's debates and discussions, and compensation requests tend to be far in excess of what the Ministry of Lands actually allocates for that type of land. And then when people object to it, you don't get a road through there. And some people want the road but don't want to give the land up, and it doesn't work that way. So we need to have the land vested to us.
Interesting. And for those landowners wishing to run a road through their land, they of course have to get in touch with the Fiji FRA, but of course have the approvals ready, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a simple process. I mean, we can only work on what we are allowed to work on as the Fiji Roads Authority. So our budget every year is geared up to our assets. Now, if somebody comes along and wants a new road that's not on our land and not one of our assets put in the ground, we have to get another budget allocation for that road. We'll do it. It'll take a bit of time maybe because of the rest of the programme that we have, maybe 6 or 9 months to get started. But the people who want the road need to understand that the land has to be vested and the budget has to be made available to us to do the land,
and it's
to do the road.
Only then the FRA can move in and begin construction on a brand new road or upgrading. Yeah. And moving on, you made mention about contractors and subcontractors. Now, of course, the FRA engages other organizations for infrastructure and upgrade projects. What would you like these potential contractors or subcontractors to understand?
I think there's a few things that our partners need to understand is that there's a lot of work out there to be done, but it needs to be done correctly. We are very precise on timing and on quality, and we don't change contract conditions. We had a few instances in the past where contractors have signed an agreement with us, and then they've wanted to change the conditions of contract. That will not happen. That will never happen. Once you've signed a contract, that's it. We want them to do the right quality. We're bringing more people in our quality team to make sure they're doing the correct quality. And contractors need to understand that if you do it right first time, you actually make more money. Rework is not payable. So we will get them to redo the work if it's not to the standard at their cost. And if they don't do it at their cost, we'll bring somebody else in to do the work and deduct it from their account. So we have to run these projects in a proper contractual way. But there's plenty of work out there for everybody. They just need to do it properly.
So the advice to potential partners would be to do the work right the first time.
Yeah. But the other thing I'd say is, and it's probably something that's not said very often, is don't overstretch yourself. I mean, if you're capable of doing 2 contracts, then do 2 contracts. Don't do 4. Don't tender for 6 because you'll fail at all of them. If you're capable of doing 2, then stick to 2, and gradually you'll grow into a bigger contractor.
Of course, it's common sense, and yes, we do know common sense is one of those rare commodities. Moving on. Now, the public has made much of the fact that certain stretches of road are repaired in a somewhat substandard manner, and that repairs are seemingly carried out on these stretches of road on an almost monthly basis. Now, how does the FRA set and maintain a standard for its contractors and its subcontractors or partners, so to speak?
Yeah, I think this constantly working on particular roads is a massive irritation for everybody at the FRA, as it is to the public as well, because it just means they're congested more often. It all goes back to the standards issue. When I first joined the FRA, to give an example, unsealed roads, there were 14 different standards for unsealed roads. 14
different standards?
Yeah. Made no sense at all.
For our tiny country.
Yeah, and it went back maybe 20 years. So the first thing we did was we rationalised it into being 2 standards. We've got a main island standard and an outer island standard, because you have to accept that you can't get the same materials on the outer islands as you can on the main islands. But we're down to 2 standards now, so once you set the standards, everyone knows what they're doing. When you've got such a random number of standards, and the contractors haven't got a clue what they're doing, so a lot of this isn't the contractor's fault, it was the FRA's fault 15, 20 years ago, by not establishing the proper standards in the first place. So we find that a lot of roads fail because they had the wrong materials put in place in the first place, and they were not done properly, which is why you'll see some locations are getting more treatment than others. Hopefully, as we do more and more treatment in those locations, the frequency goes down, because we're doing structural improvements to those roads as we go through.
I see. And you made mention of materials there. At this moment in time, how is the Fiji Roads Authority's access to materials? Do we have the right materials here in country, or do we import them?
Yeah, we're okay with materials for the roads. The stone that we use, there are good sources in Fiji. There are some sources that we're trying to not use anymore. Within 12 months, we're trying to stop using river gravel going forward. But if we stop using river gravel, we need to open up enough quarries. Quarry stone is far better for us than river gravel. And also, river gravel extraction just destroys the environment. So hopefully this time next year, all of our contracts will say not permitted for river gravel. That's what our plan is in the future. So we need to open up more quarries. Now, there are many quarry sites around the country. It's just getting the environmental approvals and the land ownership approvals to manage those quarry extractions. And I have a team right now that they're going around the outer islands to find sources there as well and get those in a manageable condition.
Very interesting. And moving on, generally speaking, what does the FRA have planned for the next 5 years?
Oh, wow. Well, budget allocations permitting, we have quite massive plans. We're doing some more. Well, I think we have to break it up into different groups. I mean, urban roads. A lot of people have the impression that we only focus on urban roads, and we don't. On the urban centres, we're trying to get more durable solutions, do more rehabilitations that we can actually just do basic maintenance for the next 20 years and they'll be okay. So that's in the urban areas. But I think the major focus over the next 5 years has to be the islands and the rural roads. We need more rural roads, we need better rural roads, and we need proper service out on the islands. So what we've done with the islands is we've created a new contract within the FRA, because in the past the islands were managed from other maintenance contracts. So Western Division, Central Division and Northern Division would look after a few islands each. And it didn't really give the emphasis to the islands that it deserved. So now I've changed that. We've got 4 maintenance contracts now, and one is specifically islands. It has its own budget allocation, its own management team, its own general manager that reports directly to me to give it a bit more focus for the outer islands. That's out for tender now, and we should be operating that new contract from August the 1st this year, in the new budget year.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Moore. Do stay with us. Very interesting discussion between myself and the Chief Executive Officer happening here on Speak Your Mind. We'll have more in our next segment. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. Joining us today on the show, we've got the Fiji Roads Authority Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jonathan Moore. And yes, sir, you had made mention about some very interesting plans that the FRA has for the next 5 years. Do you still want to elaborate more on that?
Yeah, we've talked about the islands and the rural and the urban areas, but another key focus is going to be the bridges and jetties and crossings, all the structures. What we talked about earlier was the accelerated deterioration through lack of maintenance and neglect in the past decades. That manifests itself most of all in the structures. So we have a big program of changing out bridges and crossings. So this year we're doing 17 bridges to be rebuilt. And
rebuilding,
then,
sorry.
Total new ones, totally new bridges.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then while we're changing those bridges, my team is designing the next 20 bridges. So a year later, we'll do another 20 bridges to change those out as well. And in parallel to that, we're working on 6 jetties, the smaller jetties, and then we're looking at the design for the major changes. And those major changes for jetties will take place probably 2 years from now. Changing the jetty is very complex. You have to do oceanographic studies, marine geotechnical studies. It's not as simple as just as doing a bridge. Crossings as well are a major focus right now because we have a lot of low-level crossings that frequently flood, and communities are isolated for quite long periods. So we experimented with 5 new crossings over the last 12 months, and they're a lot bigger, a lot higher, and give better flow through the openings in the crossing, with a view to not being flooded so many times. So 5 are being constructed, 4 are complete, and 1 is about to be finished in a few weeks' time. And so far they perform really well. So over the next 5 or 6 years, we're planning to change out in the region of 140 crossings. So it'll be like we're looking at maybe trying to do 20 a year if we have the budget allocation to allow us to do that. It needs to be done because some of these crossings are in poor condition as well as being flooded all the time.
They certainly are, yes. And over the years, I mean, for myself personally, we here on Gold FM have got a number of messages from the Fiji Met or from the relevant authorities in regards to crossings being flooded. Now, was this because at that moment in time, the predictions for the changes in weather and the future wasn't as accurate as they are today? Or
partly, yeah. I think that's part of the reason. I think in the past, maybe 30, 40 years ago, when some of these crossings go back 30 or 40 years, there wasn't the incidence of horrendous weather you get sometimes, the cyclones and the frequency of heavy storms. So it didn't flood as often as it does now. But there's also the fact that it's a lot cheaper to build them that way. The crossings that we're building now are not cheap, but they are more durable and they'll last longer and they'll give a better access for people on the other side of the river.
In regards to infrastructure projects, for example, jetties, bridges and crossings, what's the standard life that, the working life that the Fiji Roads Authority would like those pieces of infrastructure to have?
We're stating for bridges, we're stating 100 years. It can be ambitious, particularly for coastal bridges, but 100 years is not unusual. That's the design life that we're having. For jetties, you tend to assume a little bit less, because the one thing that the jetties have that bridges don't have is tidal action against them and wave action. So the stress on a jetty is more than it is on a bridge. So you maybe assume 60 to 80 years for a jetty. And crossings, you'd be looking at 60 years.
Interesting. Now, moving on, we get to the juicy part of the interview. Yes, many of our listeners will be interested to know about the current and, of course, planned projects in and around the country. And first up on the list, what is the Suva Arterial Road Upgrading Project?
That's the Sarup project. Okay, so Sarup 1 is finished. People would have seen over the last 18 months Sarup 1 going ahead. Ratumara, Edinburgh Drive, parts of Kings Road were all rehabilitated and refurbished. That was SARUP 1. Well, SARUP is the acronym for, as you say, the arterial roads upgrading in Suva. We're taking 15 roads in SARUP 2 in 17 locations, and we are totally rebuilding those roads. So it means we're taking out the existing roads, footpaths, everything is being removed, including utilities, and we're installing a new road, new drainage, new footpaths, new utilities, street lighting, crossings where necessary, the entire street furniture for those roads. And that's started already, actually, so we're in the planning stage right now. And it needs to be finished by the end of 2020.
Are you able to reveal what areas in general will be the work will be undertaken?
Yeah, it's throughout Suva. We've actually published the list in the press previously, but it's roads like Waimanu Road, Ratu Sakuna, Amy Street, all those roads that, in fact, if you drive around the roads now and you see the really bad ones, they're the ones that will be in SARUP 2.
So, of course, drivers who are on the roads daily will have a fair idea of what roads will probably be upgraded.
Yeah, there's a good chance they'll be included.
And
We're also, a big one we're doing is Foster Road, actually. Foster Road down by the port is in very bad condition right now. It may not be obvious to people, but when you look at it from a road engineer's point of view, it's in very poor condition and it doesn't have much life left in it. So Foster Road is one of the major focuses on the SARUP 2 project.
I see. And if I may, you already made mention that the planning phase is already underway. So when is work actually expected to begin, and how long are the projections for the project, or how long will the project take to complete?
So we're expecting people to be on site probably from around about May this year, and we're wanting it completing by the end of 2020.
Interesting. And of course, you'll be looking to increase the numbers of FRA personnel along the way.
Yeah, there's a plan to increase the resources internally, another 100 people over the next 12 months.
And in regards to the Tamovuai Bridge, now that's something everyone wants to know quite a lot about. And of course, how is progress looking, and what does the FRA have planned in regards to the Tamovuai Bridge?
I just left a meeting on it before I came here, actually, and with the contractor involved, and that's progressing pretty well. We've now got the plans are being put together, the design's being put together. This is a design-build project. But the complication in Tamovuai Bridge is that it's two bridges. We're doing one two-lane bridge now, and that'll be finished by this time next year. And later on, we're doing another bridge next to it, and that's in collaboration with the Japanese organisation JICA. They're working with us on that to do some design work and construction work with us.
So how come two bridges?
Well, we need to four-lane the road between Suva and Lamy. Yeah. And the reason for two bridges is because it's actually more logistically sensible to have two bridges, because you can build one while the existing bridge is still operating, and then you can move on to the new bridge while you take out the old bridge and put the second new bridge in the same location. So it improves congestion. But also in the long term, if you have a problem with one bridge, you've got another bridge you can use. So if the deck in the bridge gets damaged for some reason, or a truck overturns on the bridge and blocks the entire bridge, you have another one next to it that you can make it from being unidirectional to two-directional. So it can help with congestion as well.
Interesting. And of course, yes, we've reached the end of our second last segment. Do stay with us. We'll have more in our final segment here today on Speak Your Mind. Of course, our guest is the Chief Executive Officer of the Fiji Roads Authority, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind, and we're on our final segment this afternoon. With us in studio, the Fiji Roads Authority Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Sir, thank you once again for taking the time to be with us today.
You're welcome.
And yes, now in regards to the Rewa Bridge to Nakasi 4-lane road project, how's progress on that?
It's going pretty well. We set a target for our contractors to finish by June, and we're still on track to finish by June. We had a few hits over the last couple of weeks with some really heavy rain. Rain doesn't normally affect roads when they're finished, if they're sealed and managed properly. But it's a nightmare when you're trying to build roads. It's the worst thing possible. So over the last week in particular, we had some pretty heavy storms, and it washed out some seals that we'd done. We have to go back and do them again. But the contractor's working pretty hard out there, and he'll get it finished by June.
And if I remember correctly, was it last year sometime or maybe the year before that you had issues with the ground along certain areas of the railroad bridge to Nakasi project?
Yeah, that's down by Coronivia. There's a valley down there, which is the Coronivia Valley, and it's got very, very soft silt in there. So we have to consolidate the ground to get it to be stable, and that can take some time, up to 2 years to consolidate it properly. But if you don't do that and you build the road, you end up having a wavy road, and eventually it'll crack and deteriorate. So we have to do the preparation work first.
In other words, like any good builder of a home, a proper foundation is key to a good road.
Oh yeah, people see the black stuff on the top. That's not the road. The road is the structure beneath it. That's what holds it all together, and that's what makes it a decent road.
I see. And of course, apart from those issues, the traffic congestions and the delays to members of the public were something, of course, that many drivers and members of the public could not stand. I mean, what's your advice to members of the public? You just got to be patient and wait for the upgrades, right?
I'm not going to pretend it's going to go away. I've always said I'll be totally open about the congestion in Suva. It's going to be there. We're trying to fit a 4-lane road plus footpaths and cycle tracks and proper medians into a space that barely accommodates it. There's bound to be congestion. We can't help that. We have to minimise as much as we can. But going ahead, we've also got the Sarup 2 works. So we're planning to do different sections to make sure logistics were managed properly, and there'll be minimal congestion around the area. But I can't lie to the public and say it's all going to be wonderful. There's going to be congestion. We're going to manage it as best we can and make sure that people are disadvantaged as much as possible. As we go forward in the next two years, the travelling through Suva will be so much better and so much more improved for this work we're doing now.
So it's all about just having a little bit of patience until the works are completed in the various areas, and of course the traffic congestion and the traffic flow should ease once the projects are completed.
Unless we get more cars coming in the country.
And yes, in regards to these projects, you have said over the last few weeks, you have been in the media saying you don't like the way members of the public are treating your workers. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's very frustrating, and I get quite angry about it sometimes. The disregard and disrespect for guys trying to do a job for them. I mean, these guys are working for the public. They're out there in horrendous weather, through the night sometimes, working through the rain for the public, and some members of the public have no respect for them whatsoever. We have incidents, using the same example as the Rewa to Nakasi section, incidents there where cars have left the road and stopped within feet of my workers. And I've said before, I will close the job down. I'm not risking my guys on the road at all. I'll close it down and the congestion will get worse. But I'm not having them risking their lives because people can't drive properly in the roads. I've had incidents also where people have, and it goes back to some, it's just a disrespect for people where my guys are doing a job out there, and one incident recently over in Bano Levi where one of my guys saw a truck that was actually dangerously overloaded, and he got out of the car to just take a photograph, and he was threatened by the driver. In fact, he was assaulted by the driver because he snatched his keys off him, and we're now taking that through the police. I won't tolerate that. Anyone abusing my staff will not be tolerated. I'll take it as far as I can with the law.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you abuse or if you have any intentions of harassing any of the road workers, Mr. Moore has it in his power to stop the roadworks in your area. So please have a better attitude and, of course, a better approach to our road workers. And yes, moving on, we reached the end of our segment. If you've made mention earlier that you're increasing the workforce of the Fiji Roads Authority. Now, if there are any interested members of the public who wish to pursue a career with the FRA, what would you advise them? Maybe we have younger school leavers or people still in school pursuing certain topics. What would you advise a potential road worker or, professional, road working professional?
Just go onto our website. You'll find some access to the HR team on the website. They can drop emails to anybody. I mean, to me or to our HR team, and just make contact with us. Stop me in the street. I don't mind. Tell me you want a job and tell me what you can do. And I want people to be working with the FRA, and I want the Fijian people working with the FRA. One of the things I've been doing over the last few weeks, and if you go back a few years, you see a huge number of consultants working and doing work for the FRA. So the actual FRA staff was quite small, but a lot of consultants, not only from Fiji, but all over the world. So what I'm trying to do is bring it back in-house. So I want to try and get Fijians working for the FRA. And so we're reducing the number of consultants. We're making opportunities around for the Fijian people to come and work here. And we're having training programs. So if they want to join us, then let us know. Walk in the door, drop off a note, and we'll work on it. We'll get you interviewed, and we'll see what we can do with you.
And any word of advice for those members of our public who are living in those areas which need road upgrades or are looking for, to maybe get a road into the area? What would you advise them?
I think you need to, first of all, there are other means to getting these things addressed other than through the FRA. I mean, we're one obvious course of action, but they have to understand that we need to get approval to do these works. So land has to be acquired and funding has to be provided. So you can go through your local divisional office, you can write to the FRA, put the request in, and we'll see if we can actually do it. But what you need to, again, you have to understand that if you haven't got consent from all the people involved, we can't do it for the land reasons.
That's the main message to take away from that.
Yeah.
Consent has to be given by all the parties involved.
And land has to be vested to the FRA for us to build a road through it.
Thank you for that. And finally, is there any particular pressing issue that you'd like the public to understand or you'd like to highlight before we do round off things for today?
I think we've said most of it. I think a lot of it is consideration for my guys on the road. That's one big thing for me, safety on the roads. Just take your time on the roads. You're not going to get there any faster by speeding. You'll always be stopped by somebody else further up the road. And I think the other thing is just we're trying to work on this overloading issue, which is a big thing for me right now. But we're working quite closely with the LTA, with the Ministry of Infrastructure, and also with the Road Haulage Association. But it needs to be said that there's no argument or fight in all this. We've all got our own corners to protect and our own assets to look after. So the RHA has got their case, we've got our case. We just have to get down to the most objective and the most value-driven solution.
Well, thank you very much for your time with us, Mr. Moore, and of course all the best to you and the Fiji Roads Authority team for the future.
Thank you.